Inspiration, clarity, confidence, and wholehearted business strategy. Welcome to Your Next Chapter, the podcast especially for women in their 40s and beyond who know that business and personal development go hand in hand. Tune in each week for marketing, mindset, and personal growth strategies, along with inspiring stories from women around the world who are creating new businesses and lives that are personally fulfilling and financially rewarding. If you're looking to create a business and life you love, you're in great company. Let's find out what will unfold in your next chapter. I'm your host, Angela Rasmus, and I'm so delighted that you're here. Welcome back to another episode of the Your Next Chapter podcast. This is Angela Rasmus, and I have a very, very special guest here with me today, who I love the quote that I found at the top of her website, which was talking about, if someone had told me a few years ago that I'd be the founder and CEO of a tech startup, I would have laughed out loud. But now that's exactly what I'm doing, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Now that sounded delectably like a next chapter, and so I knew that I had to get Kaz McCullough on the line with us today so she can talk about how her own next chapters are evolving. Kaz, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. We met at the We Are podcast conference up in Brisbane earlier in 2017, and I was incredibly fortunate to be the winner of a prize from Kaz with her new tech business called Writerly, which we're going to get into and find out all about in today's conversation. But I want to wind back a little bit and hear in your own words, Kaz, talk to us about how this, I never would have expected it, but here it is, started to happen for you.
Oh gosh, I've had quite a few turning points actually. It's not just been one, but I think the biggest turning point was about 9 years ago when I actually sadly had an ectopic pregnancy. And I think when you have a near-death experience, and in that case it was a really hard thing to go through. For any woman it would be hard to go through, losing a baby, but also then kind of coming to terms with the fact that it nearly cost me my life and that time I had with my children that are present to me now. And at the time my partner was going through a really, really difficult patch. And I guess it just made me really take stock of my life and what I wanted to do with my life. And had I been wasting it? Had I been just, turning the wheels? And after that, I made some big decisions or changes in my life. I ended up pulling my kids out of school and unschooling them, which is a whole other, that's a big journey in itself. And I also started my first business, which was as a birth and postnatal doula. And I had been in that space working in consumer advocacy for quite a while, probably about 8 years, and we'd achieved quite a lot politically, but I was getting a bit jaded and burned out by that. And there was just a part of me that wanted to just experience what that was like to be with a woman in labour, in present to her in that experience rather than just advocating on a political level. And so I did that, and I had a lot of published material because I'd been the editor of a nonprofit magazine in that space for a couple of years. And so I had a lot of material. I just put it all on a blog, and I started blogging about my birth and parenting experiences, and it was getting quite wide readership. And in that time, I think Facebook was still fairly new. It was like 2008 or 9, and I was 2010. And yeah, time flies, hey?
It does.
Yeah. And I think because I knew how to design, I knew how to market, I knew how to write, I'd been working in the marketing comms space on and off for, probably by that stage about, 15, 16 years. And so it all just flowed for me, but I didn't realize it didn't flow for other people until people started asking me, well, how are you doing that? How are you doing your website? How are you getting so many people to call you and book in for appointments? How are you doing this? How are you doing that? And so I realized then that this was something that I needed to do for others as well, and actually charge them for it, because I hadn't been, at that point I was just like just helping people out because I like to help people. And then I
Yeah.
realized, well, actually, I think I might need to change direction a little bit. The next turning point was when I actually ended my marriage, and I ended it for a number of reasons. But I don't want to go into the big sad story. But basically, there was some abuse involved, and it was getting a little bit out of control. So I ended up walking away at that point because I couldn't bear to have my children in that relationship with the way things were. So so that was a huge turning point as well, because then all of a sudden I found myself at ground zero going, well, what do? I'm kind of making a bit of money on the side, but not really enough to live off. And I had to start all over again. And so that was 4 years ago now. And I did. I picked up, I picked everything up off the floor and I started again, and with 3 children in tow. And I did more marketing consultancy work, but I found that it was really taxing on me, and I had to drop the doula work because getting up and going out to a birth at 2:00 in the morning when I was a single parent with 3 kids just felt really unworkable to me at that time. As much as I loved it, it just didn't feel like it was going to work for the kids, particularly at that age. I mean, they're older now, but at that age, it was too hard for me. And I was going through a lot emotionally, of course, as well, being on that roller coaster post-divorce. And so I ended up exploring co-working spaces, and I had some ideas, and I started hanging out with more people who were into that kind of stuff. And I don't know, it just, one day something just clicked for me. Clients were complaining about not being able to produce quality content and not being able to produce it fast enough. And so I wanted to solve that problem. So that's it's a bit of a long story, isn't it? Sorry.
No, because that's the thing. That's the thing that I think I've seen more often than anything when I've been speaking with people on the podcast, is that this is an evolution. There is so many twists and turns and cul-de-sacs and dead ends and restarts, because nothing is ever just, well, okay, I woke up one morning and my entire life, my career was laid out in front of me perfectly. Here's the map. I know exactly what I'm going to do. We have to explore and we have to respond to what calls us, what experiences we have. And that's exactly what I can hear in the tapestry of where you've been up until now. You keep responding to the challenges and to what's pulling you forward and to what the market was telling you as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting because even lately I've had some iterations on that whole journey as well. I think that, I don't know, like I felt like I was really wrapped up in servicing the business space, and I loved servicing the business space, doing B2B work and actually, running workshops and creating events and helping small business, helping medium and larger businesses even. But what I've become really present to lately is the idea of extending what I do to the community space as well, and empowering people in community to blog and to express themselves so that people are connected to their stories. So that's kind of a new chapter that's evolving for next year.
I love how you used new chapter. Was that intentional? That made me smile.
It was subliminal.
But I also, what I'm hearing, woven through your story is amazing resilience. You've had a lot of very intense experiences, having that ectopic pregnancy, losing the child in that scenario, being a single mum, going through divorce, having to change careers when it was thrust upon you. The choice wasn't, you made the choice to start a new life, but that then had a lot of repercussions. That meant you had to step up to the plate another way. So I hear enormous resilience and courage in you as I'm listening to your story as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I think too, part of me, I guess, I felt like, I don't know, this is really hard to express, but I think sometimes when we've been through a lot of negative experiences in our life, and I find that there are some people who tend to get more than their share of those. And I don't know if I can really say that I'm one of them. I've had my share, but I wouldn't say that it's been out of balance with what a lot of other people have experienced. Human experience is to experience drama and ups and downs in life, because if we didn't have the ups and downs, I mean, we'd be flatlining, right? We'd be dead. So it is part of the human experience, yeah. But I think what I recognized this year particularly, this year's been kind of a year where I've really awakened to a lot of stuff, and I've been going on a bit of an internal spiritual journey, I guess. I don't know. I don't want to sound woo-woo, but I've been going through just the thought process of realizing that I had probably invited that drama into my life in some respects by being a certain way in life. And I've realized that I don't need to invite that into my life anymore. And it's funny when you see recurring patterns in your life or things that you're doing to contribute to those things that happen. Now, I'm not saying I couldn't control an ectopic pregnancy, and I'm not taking any responsibility for my husband being mean to me at times. I just think that there are things that we often do that make us a survivor or make us a victim. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I really do understand what you're saying, and that you've had some time in a way to look back and to ponder and to raise that awareness and start to see the patterns. And you're absolutely right. There's things that happen to us that we do not, this is what I believe, we do not have control over, but we do have control over the way that we respond to them and what we can choose to do as a result. But you're dialing up the volume on your self-awareness, and that can be nothing but a good thing. You see patterns, you choose. I think you become aware, then you've got to become willing to do something, and then you've got to actually take the action. But there's a process.
Yeah, totally. And I think part of it is with that whole victim survivor thing that goes on in a lot of people's lives is that they're replaying the drama of their life over and over again. And they're putting significance into things that happen to them. And I'd done this my entire life. And then I realized after doing a very intensive course this year, I realized that actually it's all just meaningless and empty, and I put significance on things, but it's only causing me harm. It's not causing anyone else harm. Do you know what I mean? And I realized that, particularly like with my parents, I realized one of the reasons why I was so strongly active in the advocacy space and had this real inner sense to rescue people, I realized that came from a need to prove myself to my parents, because I felt like throughout my life that they weren't proud of me and that they were criticizing me. And so every conversation I'd have with my mother, I'd be listening for her to criticize me. And then I called her after doing this course and I said, you know what, I had this story going on that you didn't love me, that you weren't proud of me, and that you were just going to criticize me in every conversation. And she just laughed and said, what do you mean? I love you and I'm proud of you. And then I realized, wow, I've spent 46 years wasting my life on a story that wasn't even true. And so when you have that realization, all that pain just goes away and you realize, wow, I've just put significance onto something that just totally didn't mean anything. And I'd made it all up in my head. Do you know what I mean? Like, we all do it.
Yes, absolutely. And that realization, that beautiful moment when you can, it's almost like, imagine like your life is like a garment that you're wearing. And then in one moment, just there, you shrug it off. It's gone.
Yes.
It's like it's dropped onto the ground. It does. I don't believe it. It means that. Yeah, it was someone that I met many years ago who said that to wear life like a loose garment was her choice, as opposed to wearing it like a straitjacket. And I've always held on to that as a beautiful analogy. So we're wearing life like a loose garment now. We realize that we can shrug it off. It doesn't have to constrain us. But I still believe that we need to continue to do the work to keep ourselves in that place of freedom, of lightness.
Yes, yeah. And I think it's a daily battle. I think it's a daily process of also surrounding yourself with other people who are on that path. I find that I think I used to have people in my life that I didn't particularly find inspiring, and they were quite toxic. And now the people who are in my life, I love them. And it's not that I've cut people out of my life. It's not that at all. It's just, I think the ebb and flow of friendships, that's part of life. But it's more that I've just really been conscious of attracting people into my life that do inspire me and that I want to learn from and be around because they're awesome. And when you're around people who inspire you and who lift you up, it changes your whole perspective on life as well. And it's not that you depend on that, because it comes from within. I firmly believe that. But it's more that in order to stay on that path when times get tough, if you've got people in your life who are uplifting and inspiring and are empathetic, that's only going to help you further along that journey. Whereas if you've got people in your life who are constantly criticizing and dragging you down, or you feel that way in life, then something else has to give, right?
Without a doubt. I mean, we've all heard that expression that you are the result of the 5 people, or a reflection of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. And I think there's no doubt. I believe one of the challenges that we as women in entrepreneurship, whether we identify as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, whatever label we like to put on ourselves, quite often we're pushing into new boundaries, and we don't always get the support from our family around us who are like, well, why don't you just go get a real job? What are you doing? And that type of thing can pull us down. And so I absolutely believe in looking for kindred spirits who understand what it is that you're trying to achieve. They may not have your why. Yeah, they may not like really understand the reason behind your desire to do the certain thing, but they respect and understand the passion that's there because they've got it for their own cause. So I think we're incredibly fortunate, in your case, that you've recognized that. And hey, let's get woo-woo for a moment, shall we? There is the concept of the law of attraction, that what you are radiating, where the energy level or the positivity level or whatever it is that you are vibrating at, that I believe is really tangible. We've all walked into rooms, into events, and we're drawn to certain people. That just happens. And that, I believe, is absolutely to do with that magnetism that someone is emanating out of them. And you start to draw those people towards you who are attracted to that. So if you've got a down and dour and life is crap and I'm a victim, then it's pretty hard to attract people into your world who are up and light and positive and ambitious. Is that the sort of thing that you'd relate to?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm not like hugely into that. I've been in spaces in the business space where, I don't know, a few years back, where people were introduced as priestesses of the law of attraction, and I just thought that's a load of crap. I don't know. To me, it's just a universal principle, right? That we are what we attract in life, and I also think we are what we show up as in life as well. So if you show up as someone who is always late, is unreliable, is, talks behind people's backs and stuff like that, you will attract garbage into your life. That is the way it is, right? Whereas if you operate out of a sense of integrity and actually being your word, actually showing up on time, being reliable, it's amazing the difference that can make. I mean, that was probably the biggest change I made this year, the biggest transformation, I guess, is just understanding, particularly for my kids, showing up on time. I was the queen of being late. I made excuses. Oh, I've got ADHD. I can't show up on time. I'm on my time. It was so profoundly selfish of me. And I realized one day that particularly for my oldest son, he really, really needs that reliability. That's how he, I guess, feels loved, when his mother actually shows up on time. And I had no idea how simple that was to transform. I thought that I was always going to be late for everything, and I didn't realize I was making myself late for everything. Such a small thing, but it had such a massive impact on all my relationships with my kids, my ex, even my clients. It just transformed those relationships, because all of a sudden, to them, I was a person that showed up on time, which was vastly different to this scatterbrain, ADHD-fueled nitwit who did not nitwit, I mean, you know what I mean, who just didn't care. And now I care because I can see that transforming one aspect in my life like that has had this huge ripple effect on everything else and on my entire mindset. And realizing that it's not just about me, but me in relationship to my kids, me in relationship to my clients, and it's a partnership at play, because we're all connected somehow, right? So this is getting a bit woo-woo, but we are all connected. We are everything we do in life has an effect on someone else. If we jump on a bus and we don't smile at the bus driver, he might make that mean, oh, she's, having a bad day, or he might make that mean, oh, she doesn't like the look of me. Do you know what I mean? So
absolutely. And that idea of everyone being connected, I'm happy to go woo to the max there, because I completely and utterly agree with that, especially the idea that big doors swing on tiny hinges. A small change can have such a significant impact. And I think that's a really important point for us to understand, is that when we're looking at self-improvement, personal development, business development, sometimes we think we've got to make these massive, enormous changes. But in fact, can have such a profound ripple effect and move out and touch everything and make that significant change. It's understanding which levers to pull and which levers to adjust, which can really help us.
Yeah, definitely. And I think too that in terms of like confidence and in terms of understanding what your capacity is or what your potential is, it is just about shrugging off all those stories that we tell ourselves. I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm not enough. And the fact of the matter is, you have just as much capability as an Olympic runner. Right?
Yeah.
You have just as much capability as a master chef. You have the same bodies, you have the same brains, even though all our brains are wired differently with different experiences, but we all have the same possibility and capacity to do what we want in life. And I think most people don't get that. They feel limited in some way. And I guess, for listeners, I just want to encourage you, don't limit yourself. Like if I'd limited myself when I entered a competition to start a startup, I wouldn't be standing here now. But I had really great people in my life and when I wanted to pull out, I did at times. I was like, oh, I don't know. And one of my friends said, well, sounds like you don't want $100,000. And I went, well, hang on, actually I do. So I went for it and I won the competition, and that changed everything for me. Like that totally now, that's why I'm doing a startup now, because I won that competition, and the opportunities, the possibilities that has opened up in my life, and just the level of confidence it's brought to my life as well. Just the journey that I've been on, both internally and externally, and having to deal with massive amounts of rejection. I mean, when you're talking to investors, that's almost worse than dating, because like it is sometimes. But it's, and I speak from experience on both sides, but it's just soul sucking. It can be if you allow it to be, but if you, I guess if you just shrug that off and realize, well, it might not be a good fit in this way or that way, and rather than taking it personally and feeling rejected, you just kind of just go, okay, well, that was that experience. Let's move on now to the next. Let's learn from that and move on. And it's a continual process, but you do kind of feel like you're on this massive roller coaster that's out of control sometimes.
And that's why it's so important, as you were saying before, to be surrounded by people who can support you through that. I mean, at the end of the day, we need to support ourselves. We need to back ourselves. We need to kinder to ourselves than we are to anybody else, because we are always there with ourselves. So having that support around you, and I do love the analogy that we're pulling on here about the shrugging off the story. There's some work that I did. I went to training with a guy, Russ Harris, who teaches acceptance commitment therapy stroke training, which is about this working through the doubt, dealing with the mind chatter. And there was just one very simple exercise. I actually ran a webinar about this. I'll link to it in the show notes. But in that webinar, I talked about one exercise I learned, which was there's the old story again. So when your mind starts going, oh, but this could go wrong, and who do you think you are? And what right do you have? And what if you fail? And all that sort of voice comes up. You notice it, you pause, you acknowledge it, but you diffuse the power with a simple statement like, there's the old story of you're not good enough again.
Oh yeah, that mental chatter never switches off, right? It's always there in the background trying to convince us that we can't do what we want to do. It's just all bullshit.
Exactly. So we have to learn how to turn the volume down, how to make peace with that inner critic who desires to keep us safe. I mean, she's well intentioned. She's just very misaligned. So it's our ability to deal with the chatter, to recognize that it is consistent, to recognize that it is repetitive. It's not very original. It's all the same shit, different day type stuff that comes up. And so that's why that circle of support is so important. It's actually one of the key reasons that my core business model was running masterminds, because having small groups of women who've got each other's back as they are striving to move forward and to expand is so important. That's one of the key reasons, because of that mind chatter.
Yeah. And it's something that I've often felt, I think one of the reasons why I've been so busy in life, or hyperactive, I guess, is I couldn't stand to be still, because if I was still, my mind chatter would switch on big time, and I'd start thinking about all the times in my life where I felt like I'd failed, and where I felt like I wasn't enough. And that little voice in the back of my head was going, oh, you really aren't good enough. And so-and-so said you were difficult. And, that's what's true about you. And so you start thinking about all those stories and going, wow, it must be true, because all these things have happened and it's been a pattern in my life. So therefore that must be how I am in life. And it really creates a lot of angst and anxiety. And then, having that realization, I guess, this year, that actually, you know what, I can create whatever I want in life. I can be somebody different now and now and now. I don't have to be that person. I don't have to repeat those patterns in life. And I don't have to use excuses. And when I had that realization, I felt like a different person. And it doesn't mean I'm not going to trip up and I'm going to lack, it doesn't mean I'm not going to lack awareness in situations, but I'm not going to beat myself up when I do. I'm just going to go, well, you know what? I'm sorry that happened. This is what I'll do next time. This is the impact it's had. I will strive to do better next time and get back up. Because if you stay down in that place and beat yourself up, it doesn't serve anybody.
Least of all, the people that you are here to serve. Because let's take that forward, that you had this breakthrough this year. You had this awareness. You had this surge of ability. I'm not saying you haven't done things in the past, because goodness knows you have, listening to all of the steps and all of the blossoming. But now something shifted. And, when we started this conversation, that concept of you start doing the tech startup, winning that award, having those funds and starting to talk to investors and work on your idea and bring it out. Talk to us about that experience and what Writerly, which is the business you have now as the startup, what that actually does and how it feels to be running it.
Okay, so basically think about it like this. So if you are a scientist or an engineer or a business owner who has specific expertise in life, so say you're a psychologist or a doctor, and you might have set up a consulting practice or a chiropractor, and your core job is to do what you do best. And it's not to be a journalist. It's not to be a media person. A lot of people in those situations will outsource their content creation, and something gets lost in the process. Their unique voice, their thought leadership gets lost, and that's what they actually need to convey to actually inspire people enough to want to do business with them, right? So what I'm all about is helping businesses and organizations extract that expertise out of those experts, out of their knowledge workers, out of their scientists, engineers, software developers, etc., and turn that into content that a customer or potential customer can read and feel inspired by and want to connect more with. So that's what I'm really about. That's what Writerly is really about. And now, like I mentioned before about going into the community space, I'm actually running a project next year, sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself. I think it might be this year by the time this goes to air. So in 2018, I am running a project. I'm running a project, a really ambitious event, where I'm going to get 150 people in a room to blog about what their experience of life is as people who are dealing with health-related disabilities, isolation, disadvantage. Because I want to create a world where discrimination because of health problems doesn't exist. And I think it exists because people lack empathy and they don't understand or connect to people's stories. And the people who are experiencing those things don't know how to share those stories oftentimes. So I'm going to bridge that gap in March next year and create an opportunity for people to come together and do this. And then we're going to publish all those blog posts. So I'm super excited about that. But what I'm really jazzed about with that is that then I can go and empower other people and other communities to take that model and use Writerly as a tool to have an impact on the world in a really, really significant way. And since I put that out there, I had a number of people come and say they want to help with this event, and I'm so excited. But one guy, he contacted me on LinkedIn. It happened to be in the city, so I said, let's meet for lunch. He was profoundly deaf. He had cochlear implants. It made him look pretty cool because he looked like a cyborg, and I just thought, wow, that's so cool. And he also has bipolar. And he was telling me that since he's started being more vulnerable and actually sharing his story, he's had a profound impact. In fact, he literally talked someone off a ledge. This is the impact our words and our content can have. So while I'm all for helping businesses, and I do that, I just recently worked with 20 scientists across Queensland, and one of them has since gone on to publish a blog post on the conversation. So that was super exciting for me to see him evolve and do that. It's, I love doing that. I love working in the professional space. But to be able to empower communities, for me, that's even bigger. Like, that just opens up a whole new world of opportunity. So I'm sort of thinking now, like, I will keep running these workshops in the corporate space because I need to make money in order to survive and grow Writerly and develop it. But going into the community space, empowering people in communities, is something that I just feel really strongly led to do as well. So I'm at a bit of a crossroads at the moment. But,
oh my goodness, listening to you talk about that, this is one of those beautiful examples where this conversation's been beautifully connected anyhow, but hearing the lift in your voice and the passion that comes through and the commitment and the excitement, which is so tangible when I hear you talk about that concept of amplifying the stories and the voices of the people, the stories that matter. That's what it feels like to me as I'm hearing you.
Yeah, that's right. And it was such an aha moment for me to realize, wow, what I've actually created here can have a massive, massive impact on a global scale. So with Writerly, technically how it works at the moment, because it's an MVP, which means it's a minimum viable product, we still do quite a bit of it manually. It's basically what we do is when people want to create a piece of content, they tell us what they want to create and why, and what their topic is, how long it is, how they want the reader to feel, how they want to come across as a brand or as an organizational person, and when it's relevant. And we take that information and we give them a recipe. And the recipe is a step-by-step framework that is specifically geared with the reader in mind. And it's infused with content marketing elements. It's infused with that know-how that I've stored up over 25 years of being a marketer. And it's laid out in a really simple format for people to follow step by step so that they don't have to think about it. They don't have to think, how am I going to introduce this? How am I going to, they don't have to sit there staring at a blank screen, which a lot of people do, and they waste hours doing that. And it means at the end of the day, the content they can create, they may not stick to that recipe exactly. And that's kind of not the point. The point is to get them started and really get them thinking about the reader. And they, at the end of the day, though, they end up with a much better piece of content that really resonates, that's authentic in their voice, and that is shareable. And from what we've seen, people who've used Writerly as a tool to create their posts have experienced incredible engagement. Like one customer actually said that she had a 200% increase in engagement on one blog post alone. And that kind of result, to me, I just want to see that happen over and over again, because that to me says, okay, this is actually helping them create something that's worth reading or consuming.
And this is why I was one of the many reasons why I was so interested in having you come onto the podcast and talk about this, because yours was the package that I won at We Are Podcast with having these recipes. And when I actually went in to order off the menu, I was surprised at how deeply it went, the questions that were asked of me to consider to have this recipe crafted. You know, as you were saying, write down step by step into how do I want my reader to feel? How do I want to be perceived as a guide or a teacher or a this or that? There was lots and lots of choices. I don't have them in front of me. But the piece when I spoke with you that really resonated the most, we understand that content is important in our connected online world, whether we are providing services on or offline. Our first connection is quite often a piece of content that someone's reading something that inspires.
That's right.
But it felt like the missing link, which you made so clear, was that we have a story to tell, we have a perspective, we have expertise, we want to get it out there. And of course, it's written from our point of view. That makes sense. We are the creator. But often we lose the link with the reader and what is going to be easiest for them to consume, or it's going to enhance a desire to act, or it's the way that they receive it. So putting ourselves into the reader's shoes so that they have a better experience reading. And it was your ability to translate my excitement about what it is that I want to share into an experience that the reader can get the most out of. And I think it's that connection where you've really hit the magic when it comes to content creation.
Thank you. Yeah, and I hope that you found that useful with you when you were actually creating it, because I'm really aware that blogging is one of those things that we tend to put off in life, and I found that the most effective way to use that tool now is to get people in a room blogging together. And so I'm going to be doing way more of that in 2018 because that seems to be a really empowering thing when people can create content together and they're under a time deadline, I guess. They're part of a workshop, they've got to do it now. It's a bit different to sitting there with a recipe going, oh yeah, I'll get around to it one day.
Absolutely. If I look at how many recipe books are sitting in my kitchen, I absolutely agree with that perspective. I'll cook that one day. In the meantime, I'll carry on with the 6 dishes that I've been recycling in my family's life forever.
Yeah, totally. And so what we're actually going to do now is scale the workshops. So I've already got a couple of people lined up to train in how to run them. We've fine-tuned them over the last year and have come up with a really great formula for doing them so that people actually, by the end of a half-day workshop, they have a draft piece of content in their hands finished. So, and that's something most blogging workshops can't achieve because they don't have Writerly as a tool. So it's kind of nice competitive advantage, but it's also means that people are more productive and they're getting the most out of it. So that to me is the biggest, that's the biggest bonus from it all.
Yeah, we want to see a tangible outcome for the people who interact with us and our services. And
totally.
The other thing that I'm hearing here, which I think is so important, we've talked about the doubt, we've talked about the getting away, letting go of the stories. We've talked about backing ourselves and taking the leap and doing things that we never would have thought we were going to do. But even now, after you've started Writerly, there's evolution going on, even in such a relatively new business. I'm sure that maybe I'm not sure, I shouldn't say that. It's likely that when you were starting Writerly, you did not see these particular possibilities. Like the business begins to evolve as you're moving forward in it. Is that fair to say? That evolution is so much a part. We have to take that first step, even if we can't see the whole staircase.
Absolutely. It is such a journey because you think you know what people want, and really you don't until you actually put something out there. And it's funny, people get really bent out of shape. What I've really had to communicate with people is that this is a minimum viable product, and we still do the recipes by hand. Human beings do them because we don't have enough data yet for a machine to do it. We need at least 10,000 recipes before we can use machine learning. So we're on our way. We've done 1,500 almost. So, and we're nearly at 1,000 users. Oh my gosh, I'd love to be at 1,000 users by the end of the year. I don't know if that's going to happen, but the end of 2017, sorry. But it'd be so good if that happened. I'm going to create that possibility now. I'm just going to create it now. We're going to have 1,000 users by the end of the week.
New story.
Yeah, that's right. New
We're
story.
creating a new story as we speak.
Yeah, exactly. And so I actually, you know what, that really inspires me to put that out there today and say, hey, help me get to 1,000 by the end of the week. That would be so cool if we could reach that milestone by the new year. And yeah, I've lost track of what I was saying now.
It's okay. If we rewind from it, it's that idea and that very important point that you just made, that you think you know what people want, but you really don't until we put it out there. I mean, we have to start our businesses with an idea, something that we feel strongly about, a gap that we can close, an issue that really makes us want to jump on our soapbox, where we see a need in the market, etc., etc. And we've got to have that courage to put it out there and then be ready for feedback and to pivot and to change and to tweak. If I look at, when I finished my marketing agency back in 2012, if I tried to project forward and imagine that today I would be running masterminds with small groups, taking women on retreat, women from all over the world actually dialing in for the group calls, I never would have seen that. I was simply, a business mentor doing one-on-one coaching. That was it. And I couldn't have seen where it had gone to, but I had to keep moving, responding to the market, but also responding internally to what was calling me and where I found that zone of genius where I'm going to operate. And I guess that's the message that I'm wanting us to make sure our listener right now understands that wherever you are is perfect, and accept and expect change as you move forward.
Yeah. And look, honestly, we're going to make mistakes, right? I have definitely made mistakes this year, and some big ones. And, let's just be authentic about that for a minute. I think when you make a mistake, you could go into that space of, I'm not good enough, I beat yourself up again. Well, who's that going to serve? Nobody. Just learn from it and grow with it and go, okay, this happened, this is why it happened, let's change things or transform things so that doesn't happen again. And I've had to really come to terms with that, just running a startup, but also doing some work on the side, copywriting work and also some marketing consultancy work, just to keep the wheels turning, and recognizing that I cannot be all things to all people. Particularly early next year when I'm doing a capital raise, I need a team behind me if I'm going to succeed. And so I've really put a lot of effort into recruiting the right people to help me as that side of the business grows, so that I'm not solely responsible for it. And also recognizing that, I am an ideas genie. I love ideas. I love ideating. I love just, being creative, and I love strategizing. But what I hate is having to project manage things. And I can do it, I'm good at it, but it then pulls me away from what I do best. So I've started to look for people in my space that I can rely on to be those project managers, so that I don't have to do it, and so that people are getting the most out of me when they're working with me. Does that make sense?
It does. That's those concepts that Gay Hendricks talks about in The Big Leap, one of those fabulous books about working in your zone of genius versus your zone of excellence.
Yes.
And you can also work in your zone of competence, but you will have the biggest impact on the planet, on your business, on your clients when you're working in that zone of genius as much as possible. So yes, I'm a huge believer in outsourcing. And when people begin their business, I know if I go back a wee while, I would have gone, oh, that's all very well for you. You're further down the line and I don't have the funds, et cetera, et cetera. But there is always small ways in which we can outsource. Small ways. I'm not saying, hand everything over at the beginning, but, starting with your first piece of, I'm going to get a Writerly recipe to be able, I'm outsourcing the structure so that I can write better blog posts. One tiny example of how you can then begin to work in that zone of genius, methinks.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if you are working with VAs, like, a lot of offshore VAs don't have the cultural context and the stories to write content that is, that just sings. And they can write like lots of how-to posts and things like that, but it's not really great content, let's face it, right? Because it's not your voice. So if you can work with a VA on that so that they do 80% of the work and then you just fill in the blanks with your stories and really polish it, then that's still a really efficient use of your time as a writer and as a marketer as well. So there's different ways of skinning I don't want to say skinning a cat. That's horrible.
No, we've settled for skinning the potato. You can say skinning the potato on
skinning
this one.
Skinning a potato. Yeah, that's okay. Potatoes don't have feelings from what I can tell. Yeah, sorry. It was just the image that popped into my mind, and I was halfway through saying it, and I went, oh, that's horrible. Yeah. I love dogs too.
You're absolutely right. This and in terms of the way in which we can work with our supporters. But it sounds as though, I mean, there's big plans coming for you and for Rightly and for your own next chapter evolution, and that's exciting. You know, this is why I love having these conversations on the podcast, because the whole purpose is to inspire possibility, to see and hear how other people are stepping into their dreams, stepping into, you know, these possibilities with fear. Fear sits there, you know, doubt sits there, but we keep moving anyway. If we try and wait until the doubt disappears, we'll be sitting on the park bench for quite a long time, he thinks.
Yes, that's so true.
Well, let's work out how we can have people come and find you in the world. Obviously, I'll pop these onto the podcast page, but I know there's some other things that I wanted to mention here briefly, that you have a book called Your Brilliant Uncareer, Women, Entrepreneurship and Making the Leap. So that's certainly an Amazon bestseller, and I'd certainly encourage our listeners to go and have a wee look at that. And I love the name of your course that you have, Blogcrastination Obliterator.
Obliterator, yeah.
I'm finding it hard to say the words. Create your 12 months of content in 7 steps. So I'm a big believer in framework. So if you can provide a framework that somebody can then blossom individually within, but they've got that starting point, then that makes our life easier. So I'll make sure that I pop links through to there as well. But I guess my last question for you, Caroline, is what sort of thoughts would you like to leave someone with who is sitting there now going, wow, listen to the evolution that Kaz has made. How can I get moving? How can I start down whatever the path is that appeals to me? What would you say to someone that's a little bit scared but excited at the same time?
Well, somebody said something to me this week that really shifted something for me as well. It's a weekly thing these days. And I want to share that. So he said, think about the people in your life that you say yes to easily. Who are they to you? And what is it about them that makes you want to say yes? And oftentimes we don't say yes to ourselves. We don't back ourselves, right? But what if we could be those people, not just to other people, but to ourselves as well, right? What if we could be that person that everyone says yes to? Wouldn't that just be amazing?
It most certainly would. I like that. I've got the vision there of looking in the mirror and like looking deeply into your own eyes and saying, yes, you've got this.
Yes.
I back you. Take the leap.
Yes.
Wonderful. Oh, look, thank you so much for spending your time here with me today. I've really appreciated it, and hearing your story and hearing, quite often women who are into their next chapters, those next chapters are built on what I call skinned knees. Like we're in our 40s. There's scars. We've experienced life, but we can take so much of the strength and so much of that wisdom and use it to fall forward with, which is exactly what you're doing. And taking yourself into these new realms is hugely inspiring. So I really appreciate that. Where do we find you online so that we can go searching for more of Kaz?
Yeah, so I have a personal website, which is kazmccullough.com, but also Rightly.com if you want to check out Rightly as well.
Fantastic. I'll make sure that those links are in the show notes as well. And we'll all contribute to those, at least 1,000. And by the time this episode goes live, who knows how many more of those recipes on Rightly would have been curated in your kitchen.
Yes. Awesome.
Thanks so much, darling. And you, my lovely listener, another great example of what is possible when you decide to pack up those old stories, let them go, and move forward into a new possibility. We've all got things that we're overcoming in our backgrounds, but the beauty is that we can actually use those experiences as building blocks to reach higher. There are so many women I speak with on this podcast who are doing just that. And as you've heard time and time again, if you're a regular listener, we all have doubt. No one is out there pounding on their chest and saying this is easy and I'm going to do it in the next 24 hours. There's always fear, and that's okay. If you can turn that fear into future fuel, if you can focus on the cause in the world that you are passionate about making a difference about, and it doesn't have to be at the Mother Teresa level, it can be at your community level, your neighborhood, the small thing that you really care about in your heart that you're here to make a change for. And that's what Next Chapters are all about. They're deeply personal and they can be deeply rewarding if you back yourself and step forward. So I hope that listening to this story today gives you just a little bit more of that future fuel so that you can blossom in your own next chapter. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll be back again for another episode really soon. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Your Next Chapter podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please let me know. Pop over to angelaraspas.com to subscribe to the show and leave a review. And whilst you're there, you can also enjoy valuable free resources, including show notes and downloads, along with the Next Chapter community, where you can connect with other wholehearted women on the same journey as you. We'd love to welcome and support you as your next chapter unfolds. See you next time.